Hello and welcome to Drinks with Her. I am your host, Kate Agnew, and with me today I have Molly Cross. Molly is a woman who has worked in various industries, focusing exclusively on helping companies focus on customers and being a little bit more customer centric. She most recently started at Docent Health as the Director of Transformation, where she helps hospitals improve the customer experience by allowing patients to feel heard, valued, and welcome. And in her spare time, Molly really enjoys the outdoors, nature, and getting 8 hours of sleep a night, which I really appreciate. She is a New England native and has degrees from both Harvard and MIT Sloan. Molly, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yes. So I want to know a little bit more about what it was like for you when you kind of realized that you were a lesbian. And then also what it was like to come out to your family. So take that in whatever route you want.
Those are two very different experiences and time periods for me. So the coming out, the sort of like personal realization, I was on the later side. I mean, what I would consider on the later side, it was in my early 20s. Sort of towards the end of my college experience, and also sort of like in my early adult life, living in Boston. And I think for me, it was like, growing up, I was always like very feminine, long blonde hair, like dated boys, like boys liked me. And so I was always like, oh, well, like I'm, there was never any questioning. It was like, I'm straight. Like, that's just who like I didn't, even though I was sort of intrigued and like I could tell a bunch of stories about things now that I'm like, oh, well, duh. But like, I was always intrigued by women and lesbians who I knew, but I was like, oh, well, that's not me. I'm just,
I have blonde hair. I'm straight.
I have blonde hair. And so what was funny was when I finally started to explore that, it was actually a very good friend of mine who I went to college with who helped me. Having a friend who had just come out, we were living together in Boston, and she sort of started taking me. I sort of started asking, hey, will you take me out? So we started going to some of the gay bars and nightclubs and stuff like that. And I think what's so funny is like I cut my hair off and I started wearing men's clothing and was like, well, if I'm going to be a lesbian, I need to be this way. And I think at that time I was confusing sexuality with gender identity, which a lot of people still do. And it's hard to sort of divorce the two, right? But so then it took me another, few years to be like, wait, like I can be myself, who is like a relatively feminine, I guess like feminine, physically feminine. I would consider myself more masculine in my sort of personality, but I can be myself and also be a lesbian, and those two things don't have to be separate. Also, if I think about myself in my earlier years, I did everything I was supposed to. I did everything that my dad told me to do, or everything that I thought would make my parents proud. Like, did really well in school, was really good at sports. I got into Harvard. I didn't even know that I wanted to go to Harvard, but I went because everyone was like, oh my God, you got into Harvard. And then got a job. It was like sort of I was on this path of like being this successful, I don't know, well-adjusted human being. So this sort of made me was different for me. And I think so then it took me once I sort of, it took me a few years to get to the point where I was comfortable telling my parents. It was easier with like the younger generation, like my siblings and my cousins, and I would bring girlfriends around, and no one ever thought twice really. But for some reason, with my father, who in retrospect this is ridiculous, but my father, I just like didn't want to talk about it. I was like, I just don't want to talk to my dad about who I'm sleeping with. I don't know, like whether it's a man or a woman. And so I think he had like heard from like my cousins telling their, like I wasn't hiding it. I just was avoiding that conversation. And so I actually came out, and my mom passed away when I was younger. But I actually came out to my dad over GChat because he asked over GChat, which is funny now because
What did he say?
Well, I had brought my then girlfriend. So actually, what's funny? I was in business school.
Okay.
It was my, this which is actually crazy because, you know, it's only 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But I was dating a woman she was actually at Harvard Law at the time. And we were in Rhode Island for some reason with friends, and I was like, oh, let's like stop by my parents' house, let's say hi. And so I brought her over, and I guess it was like blatantly clear to my father, like, because he already sort of knew. It was sort of the like, okay, that's definitely her girlfriend. And then he G-chatted me, I think on Valentine's Day or right after, and was like, so who's your Valentine? And I was like, Dad, I think you know. And he's like, I do know, I just need you to say it. And I was like, okay, it's Emily. And he was like, okay. He's like, I don't know if this is like appropriate for like, but if she ever does anything to hurt you, I'll like kill her or whatever. But you know, I was like, yes.
I'll rough her up.
Yeah. And what's so funny now in retrospect is like how amazingly supportive he is and has always been. And it's like didn't even skip a beat. And he and my stepmom and all of my aunts and uncles, everyone, and my grandfather, who's 91 years old. I mean, I don't know. Now looking back, it's like, why did I wait? Why did I hesitate? Why wouldn't I have just been myself? And, you know, from that point on, our relationship was, I mean, we always had an awesome relationship. My dad is my like number one person, aside from my wife now. But it just changed our relationship. It made it so much more honest and authentic.
Now, as I'm graduating from Sloan, I kind of look around. Thank you. I look around and I think, why on earth is MIT giving me my like graduate degree? That feels silly because I look around and I see all of my peers who do these amazing things, and I know we're going to do amazing things in their lives,
and they're
really going to contribute. So it's kind of interesting to like have myself be in this position. Did you think that way when you were graduating from Sloan? Did you have some of those like self-confidence issues, and how did you get over them?
Yeah, so
if you have.
So this question's really funny and really relevant because we were talking about it at work on Monday. It's this thing called the imposter syndrome, where and it's more prevalent in women, where you think that you're going to get like found out, that like people are going to realize that you're not as successful, you're not as smart, you're not as whatever as they think you are. And honestly, that's something that I have struggled with a lot in my life. I mean, going back to being at Harvard, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, these people are the best of the best of the best at what they do. And like, yeah, I got straight A's, but like, I didn't, you know, I just like was like,
try.
Well, no, I was like, you know, there was nothing super special about me. I was sort of like good at a lot of different things. And I just remember like, and that's where it started for me, was being like, whoa, like, why am I here? I don't belong here. And I think it took so for me, it took until Sloan, just that feeling of that imposter feeling. But I think like I went into Sloan, like wanting to prove that to myself, that I did belong. And it was hard to do that at Sloan because again, you're in the same environment where everyone's really smart. But I think I do think that I gained a lot of confidence. So, like, I don't know if that, like, I gained a lot of confidence at Sloan, actually. I thought for me, it was an awesome environment to learn in. But it's so like I gained confidence, but I also still, like, even when you were just reading my bio, I'm like, oh, she has degrees from Harvard and MIT. I'm like, who's she talking about? You know, it's like I don't have a emotional connection when people say, you know, to like my resume, basically. I'm like, oh, that's not me. Is that me? Oh my gosh. Like, you know, it's like, oh, that person sounds really smart and accomplished. And I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And there's just like a weird disconnect there, for sure.
You don't feel that about yourself when you just think about yourself.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and talk about a little bit more about your marriage. So one of the topics that has come up in my own like wedding preparations is what we'll do about our last names.
Okay.
So I want to know what that conversation was like for you. I'm guessing that it's just different when it's two women having this conversation, but you did take her last name, correct?
I did, yes.
So yeah, what was that like?
So it's funny because I would say it was more of an internal internal conversation with myself because I think I just sort of decided early on, I was like, I kind of want to take your name. And she was like, okay. And that, it was like, that was the conversation. But I think for me, because we did have a lot of options of like, do we hyphenate? Do we take my last name? Do we take her last name? Do we keep our own names? And you know, there's been a lot of.
Then there's the create your own. I think that's the fifth option.
And it's so funny because some of our friends are doing that. And it's awesome. But I think like, so there's just like Molly Cross, like that's an easy. I mean, my maiden name's Bodell, which is also an easy name, but Molly Cross I thought had like a nice ring to it. I think she has an identity so Nikki Cross, like the soccer player who has like a Wikipedia page. So I think for her it would have been harder to like unravel that identity because that identity is helping her like start soccer camps and you know whatever it is she's doing. But I also felt strongly that we had the same last name because we do want to have children eventually, and I just think I just think for me, I want us all to have the same last name. It sort of creates that nice little family unit. So yeah, it was kind of an easy conversation for us.
Yeah.
And the only thing is I like think about my dad, and I wonder if he cares that I chose. But I guess it happens.
You've never talked to him about it?
I told him that I was taking her last name, and he was like, "Oh, okay," you know. And you know, and actually he doesn't know this, so I hope he doesn't watch this before I tell him. But I actually went to legally change my name last week. I went to the Social Security office, and I was planning to put Bodell as my middle name and take away my middle name. But when I went to fill out the paperwork, I actually had like a very like strong emotional reaction to getting rid of my middle name. So I actually got rid of Bodell and kept my middle name, which is Summersby, which is actually like a part of I would say not like my identity, but it was my mother's middle name, and it was her great grandmother's maiden name, and so I think for me to keep that part of the family, sort of a piece of me, ended up being more important than I thought, which is funny because in my like professional world right now, I'm going by Molly Bodell Cross, so who knows?
Which is not your name.
Which is not actually my name, but Bodell for like that recognition, right? Because like you email people and they're like, who is this? So.
Well, that's how I found you. It was suggested that I reach out to Molly Bodell, and so I Googled you and came on your wedding website, and that's where I figured out that you changed your last name and was able to track you down.
Yeah.
So in my situation, like the exact same page as you were at, like we contemplated all of those decisions, but ultimately decided that we wanted to have one single family name, and so that narrowed it down to either my last name or his last name, which I think that even that my last name for the both of us was an option is very new.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And we had a lot of conversations about it. It wasn't just like a, hey Joe, you're gonna take my last name type conversation, obviously.
Yeah.
And he actually talked to his family about it quite a bit beforehand, talked to his mom, talked to his dad.
Wow.
Just to kind of flesh out, like, am I going to hurt people? Is this going to be a big deal? And then at the end of the day, like, that's just kind of what we're going with.
So he's taking
so he'll be
your last name.
My last name, yeah.
That's awesome.
He'll be Joe Agnew, which is funny because my middle name is Joe. So I'll be Katie Joe Agnew and he's Joe Agnew. So.
And what made you guys decide?
I think a lot of it has to do with it being my own kind of that strong personal identity that I have with my last name. But I actually have my mom's last name. So she was never like in a relationship with my biological father. And so when she had me, she was like, this is my daughter. It's not his daughter.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be my last name.
Yeah.
And I think that like, it's kind of a feminist thought. And I feel strong ties to it because of that. And it's also my grandma's last name because my grandfather had died before I was born.
Okay.
And so I know my grandma as Mrs. Agnew because she was a teacher for 40 years. And so I associate that name so much with who I am, and I come from a family of strong women.
Yeah,
so,
that is so awesome.
Yeah, we're
I've heard,
excited about it.
lots of men being like, oh, it's emasculating to take the woman's last name, and it's just like, what?
I just don't get that. Like, why is it the assumption that it has to be the woman?
Yeah, especially this day and age, where a lot of those traditional assumptions don't dictate anything.
Right.
But why is it that certain weird things like the last name still go that way?
Like, hopefully I'll be making more than him once I get a job, knock on wood.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to chat with you about.
Yeah,
So
that's
cool
so
to get your
awesome.
insights. So I want to ask a little bit more about your childhood.
Okay.
And you said that you lost your mother at a young age. How old were you, and can I ask more about what happened?
Yeah. It's funny, actually.
Yeah, I bet this is going to be really funny.
No, but, well, it's ironic. So I lost my mother when I was a sophomore in high school. She was an alcoholic, and basically died of alcoholism. She drank herself to death.
Seriously?
Yeah, which is why it's ironic I'm drinking beer. But
my mom's an alcoholic.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Welcome to the
Not
fam. I don't
funny,
know.
I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like our childhood was not great. But my older brother actually, I think he bore the brunt of it, and he protected me from a lot of awful things that I didn't have to experience as a young child that he did.
Yeah.
He protected me a lot, and I will always be thankful for him. And I think that because of him, I was able to go on to be the well-adjusted person that I am today. But yeah, we were already, by the time she passed away, my brother and I had already been taken away by the Department of Social Services and gone to live with my dad. So I started my sophomore year in high school in a private school in Rhode Island. I'd grown up with my mother in a town in Massachusetts. And
they were divorced.
They were divorced. They'd been divorced since I was probably 5 or something. Yeah. So, which, my dad talks about now, and he's like, I should have known at the time what was driving us apart, and it was her alcoholism. But it's hard to know or see it, when you're so close to someone. So we'd gone to live with my dad and my stepmom and my stepfamily, who are wonderful. And I think she was selling the house because she couldn't take care of it anymore, and she was getting sicker and sicker, and I think she just kind of gave up a little bit. Mm-hmm. She didn't have my brother and I anymore. We were everything, and I think she just sort of was like, I don't really, I just, she was dealing with depression and all the other things, and I think she just sort of was gave up a little bit. And I'm lucky that I have my father, who's wonderful, and my stepmom, who's awesome, and they've been married for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And my stepmom had 2 children, and they had a child together, so I have a half sister who's 21. And so we are and my stepmom's husband also died. So we are somewhat of a dysfunctional Brady Bunch family unit, but we are a family unit, and so I feel lucky that I have that family, even though it's not like my biological mother, Yeah. You never really know what's going on with people and families, and even the most perfect family is still complicated, and
Right.
So.
And there's no right path.
Yeah.
Like, my friend's parents were still together, and she ended up at McAllister for undergrad, and my mom was just my mom, and I didn't have parents that were together, and I still ended up there. So it's not like I had to grow up in a family not eating Lucky Charms or having sliced bread to make anything of myself.
Yeah.
I remember at the time I was trying to identify, tell me all about your childhood, what was it like, trying to pick out these nuggets so that I knew when I had children what I could do to make them awesome like my friends. And those were the 2 things. They were never allowed sugary cereal, and I lived on that.
Oh my gosh. Lucky Charms, Cocoa Puffs?
I still have Lucky Charms to this day in my apartment. And then another thing is they never had sliced bread. They would buy a loaf from
interesting.
The farmer's market, and then they would bring it home and
That's so
cut
funny.
it. I remember the first time I was living with, her name was Molly as well. We were living together senior year, and I was but the bread isn't cut. Like, what do you do? And she could not handle me. Like, I grew up with a lot of experiences that are like, I was very street smart, but I didn't learn how to cut bread.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
we each get to MIT or wherever our paths bring us.
Different paths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been really nice.
Yeah. It's funny how there's like, who knew that we'd have so much in common, you know?
Yeah. I think that's what's nice about getting to know people and kind of break through that layers. Because, people don't just walk up to someone at a networking event and talk about these things.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go through things like this. But it's not cool to flaunt it and share it, but it is helpful to talk about it. So it's kind of too bad that it's so outside of the norm.
Yeah. Which is why I think I hate networking. I do it a lot because, like, in startups you like have to network. But I think what I try to do in every interaction is be super authentic. And like, if it's like in our conversation, like I just sort of like, oh well, my mom's dead. It's just like a fact of life, you know. And like I think that and then also being out for me is really important. So I think like creating the space even to like be authentic and like have those authentic conversations, and also share stuff with you that makes you a little bit vulnerable, even if you don't have to. It's really a good thing.
Yeah, it's what will make you a good leader.
Hopefully.
Yes.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, no worries.
Great chatting.
It was nice to meet you too.
I didn't say it was nice to meet you.
Oh, it was nice to talk.
No, it was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.